1. Texture of soil. The texture of a soil is determined by the production of different sized soil particles. Mineral fractions or particles of soil are called soil fractions, or soil separates. The soil particles have been classified into gravel, sand, silt and clay on the basis of their size differences. Gravel consists of coarse particles larger than 2.0 millimeters. Sand ranges from 0.02 to 2.0 millimeters in diameter and is easily seen and feels gritty. Silt consists of particles from 0.002 to 0.02 millimeters in diameter, which scarcely can be seen by the naked eye, feels and looks like flour. Clay particles range below 0.002 millimeters in diameter, are too fine to be seen even under the ordinary microscope, and are colloidal in nature. Clay controls the most important properties of soils, including plasticity and exchange of ions between soil particles and soil solution. Most soils are mixture of these various particles. Based on the proportions of the various particles contained in them, soils can be grouped into 5 textural groups. 1. Coarse textured soils are loose, consist mainly of sand and gravel. They retain very little moisture and supply some plant nutrients. 2. Moderately coarse soils include sandy loam to very fine sandy loam. 3. Medium textured soils are mixture of sand, silt and clay, high enough to hold water and plant nutrients. 4. Moderately fine textured soils are high in clay. They are moderately sticky and plastic when wet. They may form a crust on the surface if organic matter is low. They have a high moisture holding capacity. 5. Fine textured soils contain more than 40% clay, may be sticky and plastic when wet and hold considerable water and plant nutrients, but may have restricted internal drainage. All these 5 textural soil groups include 12 textural classes, see Table 3 to 7, which have been recognized on the basis of relative percentage of soil particles, i.e., sand, silt and clay. Table 3 to 7. Textural classes of soil. 2. Structure of soil. Soil separates, sand, silt and clay, are held together in clusters or shapes of various sizes, called aggregates or PEDs. The arrangement of these PEDs in earth crust is called soil structure. Like texture, there are many types of soil structure. Soil PEDs may be classified as granular, crumb-like, blocky plate-like or platy, and prismatic or columnar. The properties of different soil PEDs have been tabulated in Table 3 to 8. Characteristics of PEDs. Types of PED properties. 1. Granular small, spherical and non-porous. 2. Crumb-like small, porous and spheroidal. 3. A granular blocky block-like with sharp ends, one end may be pointed. 4. Subgranular blocky block-like but bounded by other aggregates. 5. Platy plate-like, sometimes plates are overlapped. 6. Prismatic or columnar prism-like but without rounded surface. Structureless soil can be either single-grained or massive soil aggregates. PEDs tend to become larger with increasing depth. Structure is influenced by texture, air, moisture, organic nutrients, microorganisms, root growth and soil chemical status. 3. Soil color. Soils exhibit a variety of color. Soil color may be inherited from the parental material, i.e., lithochromic, or sometimes it may be due to soil forming processes, acquired or genetic color. Though color has little direct influence on the functions of a soil, but is important in the identification of soil type. In temperate regions, dark-colored soils generally are higher in organic matter than light-colored ones. Well-drained soil may range anywhere from very pale brown to dark brown and black, depending upon the organic matter content. Red and yellow soils are the result of iron oxides, the bright colors indicating good drainage and good aeration. Other red soils obtain their color from parent material and not from soil-forming processes. Well-drained yellowish sands are white sands containing a small amount of organic matter, and such coloring matter is iron oxide. Red and yellow colors increase from the cool regions to the equator. Quartz, kaolin, carbonates of lime and magnesium, gypsum and various compounds of ferrous iron give whitish and grayish colors to the soil. The grayest are permanently saturated soils in which the iron is in the ferrous form. Soil color and temperature. Soil color influences the soil temperature. The dark-colored soils absorb heat more readily than light-colored soils. Ramdas et al. 1936 showed that black cotton soil soft puna absorbed 86% of the total solar radiations falling on the soil surface as against 40% by degree alluvial soil. Physical properties of soil. Soil possesses many characteristic physical properties such as density, porosity, permeability, temperature, water and atmosphere, each of which can be studied under following separate headings. 1. Soil density. Average density of soil is 2.65 grams per milliliter. Density of soil varies greatly depending upon the degree of weathering. 2. Porosity. The spaces present between soil particles in a given volume of soil are called pore spaces. The percentage of soil volume occupied by pore space or by the interstitial space is called porosity of the soil. Porosity of soil depends upon the texture and structure, compactness and organic contents of soil. Porosity of the soil increases with the increase in the percentage of organic matter in the soil. The pore spaces are of 2 types: 1. Micropore spaces, capillary pore spaces, and 2. Macropore spaces, non-capillary pore spaces. Capillary pore spaces can hold more water and restrict the free movement of water and air to a considerable extent, whereas macropore spaces have little water holding capacity and allow free movement of moisture and air in the soil under normal conditions. 3. Permeability of soil. The characteristic of soil that determines the movement of water through pore spaces is known as soil permeability. Soil permeability is directly dependent on the pore size. Therefore, it is higher for the loose soil with large number of macropore spaces than it is for compact soil with numerous micropore spaces. 4. Soil temperature. Soil gets heat energy from different sources such as solar radiation, decomposing organic matter, and heat formed in the interior of Earth. The temperature of soil is affected by its color, texture, water content, slope, altitude of the land, and also by climate and vegetational cover of the soil. Evaporation of water from soil makes it cooler. Black soils absorb more heat than white soils. Sandy soils absorb more heat and radiate it out quickly at night than clay or loam soils. The soil temperature greatly affects the physicochemical and biological processes in the soil. For example, the germination of seeds, normal growth of roots and biological activity of soil inhabiting micro and macroorganisms which require proper and specific temperature. 5. Soil water. In soil, water is not only important as a solvent and transporting agent but in various ways it maintains soil texture, arrangement and compactness of soil particles and makes soil habitat livable for plants and animals. It comes in soil mainly through infiltration of precipitated water, dew, rain, sleet, snow, and hail, and irrigation. According to improved classification method of Buyukos 1920, soil water is classified into following types: gravitational and groundwater, capillary water, hygroscopic water, combined water and water vapor. I. Gravitational water. In a well-saturated soil, the accessory extra amount of water displaces air from the pore spaces between soil particles and percolates downwardly under gravitational influence and finally it is accumulated in the pore spaces. This accumulated excess water of large soil spaces is called gravitational water. When this gravitational water further percolates down and reaches to the level of parent rock, it is called groundwater. Both kinds of these soil water are ecologically important in the leaching of nutrients. E. Capillary water. The water which is held by capillary forces, i.e., surface tension and attraction forces of water molecules, in smaller soil channels, when the gravitational water and groundwater have been drained, is called capillary water. Capillary water occurs as a thin film around soil particles in the capillary spaces and represents the normal available water to the plants. It remains in soil for long periods and carries with it nutrients in solution. Humus has more capillary water than soil minerals. E. Hygroscopic water. Soil particles retain some water so firmly that the plants cannot absorb this. Such soil water is called hygroscopic water. IV. Combined water. Combined water is the water of chemical compounds held by chemical forces of molecules such as hydroxides of silicon, iron and aluminium. It is of no ecological significance. V. Water vapor. Some soil water occurs as moisture or water vapors in the soil atmosphere. Further, the total amount of water present in the soil is called holard. The quantity of water that plant roots can absorb out of holard is called crissard and that amount of soil water which cannot be absorbed by plant roots is called echard. Moreover, there are some terms that reflect the water status of soil and are generally used for comparative studies of different soils. A. Soil water potential. This is an expression of the total reduction of water potential in the soil, due to mineral matrix, solubility, external pressure and gravitation effects. B. Field capacity. When a soil holds all the water it can, but no gravitational water, it is said to be at its field capacity. Field capacity is generally defined as the water content of an undisturbed soil, percent of and dry weight, after it is saturated by rainfall and drainage of gravitational water has completely stopped. Field capacity of soil may be taken as the total amount of capillary, hygroscopic and combined water plus water vapor. C. Moisture equivalent. It is defined as the water content, percent of and dry weight, retained by the undisturbed soil. D. Water holding capacity, or storage capacity. This is the extent to which a soil can hold capillary water against gravity. It is equal to field capacity less hygroscopic water. E. Hygroscopic coefficient. It is defined as the water vapor percent absorbed by unit weight of dry soil, when placed in an atmosphere completely saturated with water vapors. F. Permanent wilting percentage, or wilting coefficient. It is the amount of water percent of and dry weight that remains in a soil when permanent wilting is present in the plants growing in soil. The status of soil water is also represented in terms of capillary potential equals metric potential. The relationship that exists between soil water content and water potential is usually determined by a pressure membrane apparatus, called tensiometer. 6. Soil atmosphere. Gases found in pore spaces of soil profiles form the soil atmosphere. The soil atmosphere contains three main gases, namely O, Colorado, and N. Soil air differs from atmospheric air in having more of moisture and Colorado, and less of O. The soil atmosphere is affected by temperature, atmospheric pressure, wind, rainfall, etc. Loam soils with humus contain a normal proportion of air and water, about 34% air and 66% water, and therefore are good for majority of crops. Coarse textured or well-structured soils contain higher gaseous diffusive transfer rates than fine textured or poorly structured soils under wet conditions. This is because they contain many large pores which remain gas-filled. The water-filled pores of the fine textured soils form potent barriers of gaseous diffusion. O diffuses 10,000 times more slowly in water than in gas. In dry soil, the situation is reversed, as the fine textured soils have a greater total pore space and provide a larger gas-filled cross-sectional area for diffusion. Soil aeration is very important in growth of roots, seed germination and microbial activity. Poor soil aeration suppresses root hair development, and may reduce rate of absorption of water and nutrients. 7. Soil solution. There exists a weak solution of various salts, along with other liquids and gases in the soil mass. This soil solution contains almost all the essential minerals. Complex mixture of minerals such as carbonates, sulfates, nitrates, chlorides, and organic salts of Ca, Mg, Na, K, etc., are found as dissolved in water. The chemical nature of soil solution depends on the nature of parent matter, chemical nature of organic matter and climatic factors and other factors involved in pedogenesis. The soil solution is the primary source of inorganic nutrients for plant roots. Soils with optimal concentration of various nutrient solutes are called eutrophic, whereas those with suboptimal concentration of these nutrient salts are called oligotrophic. Chemical properties of soil. Soil is a mixture of various inorganic and organic chemical compounds and exhibits certain significant chemical properties, all of which can be discussed as follows. Inorganic elements and compounds of soil. The chief inorganic constituents of soils are the compounds of following elements: A1, C, Ca, Mg, Fe, K and Na. Soil also contains smaller amounts of compounds of following inorganic elements: B, Mn, Cu, Zn, Mo, Co, I, F, etc. B. Organic matter of soil. The chief organic component of soil is humus, which chemically contains amino acids, proteins, purines, pyrimidines, aromatic compounds, hexose sugars, sugar alcohols, methyl sugars, fats, oils, waxes, resins, tannins, lignin and some pigments. Further, humus is black-colored, odorless, homogeneous complex substance. C. Colloidal properties. As soil is composed of crystalloids and colloids, therefore, it exhibits all the physico-chemical properties which are related with these two soil particles. Colloids, for example, exhibit absorption, electrical properties, coagulation, Tyndall phenomenon, Brownian movement, dialysis, etc. D. Soil pH. Many chemical properties of soils center around soil reaction. As regards their nature, some soils are neutral, some are acidic and some basic. The acidity, alkalinity and neutrality of soils are described in terms of hydrogen ion concentrations or pH values. A pH value of 7.0 indicates neutrality. A value above this figure, 7.1-14.00, indicates alkaline condition, and a value below, 0-6.9, indicates acid conditions. Normally, the pH value of soils lies between 2.2 and 9.6. In India, acidic soils pH below 5.5 to 5.6 occur in the high rainfall areas of Western Ghats, Kerala, Eastern Orissa, West Bengal, Tripura, Manipur and Assam. The saline, alkaline or basic soils called Usar contain pH up to 8.5 of India, Akiran UP, West Bengal, Punjab, Bihar, Orissa, Maharashtra, Madras, MP, AP, Gujarat, Delhi and Rajasthan. Some pH values are ecologically significant for the plants. Pearsall, 1952. Plants regarded as calcicoles usually occur in soil with pH 6.5, whereas calcifuges occur in soil with pH value below 3.8-4.0. Soils above pH 6.5 are generally cation saturated, those containing free kako, called calcareous soils, while soil below pH 3.8-4.0 contain a considerable content of exchangeable hydrogen. These limits of pH value are also reflected in the nature of the soil's organic matter. Raw humus or more, which is associated with soils below a pH 3.8, while mull is characteristic of the more cation saturated soils of pH 4.8-5.0 and above. Highly acidic and highly saline or alkaline soils often remain injurious for plant growth, microorganisms, etc. Soil pH strongly affects the microbial activities, as at below pH 5.0 bacterial as well as fungal activities are reduced. Neutral or slightly acidic soil, however, remains best for the growth of majority of plants. Soil as habitats for animals. Soil is used by various animals as a hideout from enemies, to escape desiccation and extremes of temperature, as material for abodes, and as a highway. Clay is cold, dense, poorly aerated, and though it holds much water, does not give up water readily to plants and animals. Sand is dry, loose, cave in readily, and has a variable temperature. Rock heats and cools quickly, has little available water and practically no air, and is usually too resistant to allow penetration by burrowing animals. Alkaline soils are physiologically dry, because the salts present hold the water so that it is not readily available to organisms. Humus has a great water capacity and gives up water readily, is usually well aerated and furnishes nitrogen as well as mineral salts and water. It remains rich in biota. Peaty soils are raw humus and are uninhabitable for most animals because they are poorly aerated and have an acid reaction. In general, the character of the vegetation cover serves as a good index of the habitability of soils for animals. Conditions that make plants flourish are usually favorable for animals. Soil fauna and soil flora. Soil supports a wide array of organisms of different body sizes and taxonomic groups. Generally, soil organisms are classified into three major groups, namely microfauna and microflora, mesofauna, and macrofauna. Mesoflora and macroflora, because occur above the surface of soil, land surface therefore, are excluded from this discussion. 1. Microfauna. It includes animals with body size within the range of 20 pm to 200 pm. It includes all protozoa and small-sized mites, nematodes, rotifers, tardigrades and copepod crustacea. Soil-inhabiting protozoans such as amoeba, ciliates, zoomastigene flagellates occur near the surface soils, while the testate forms such as the chamoeba, euglypha and difflugia have a wider vertical distribution. The common terrestrial polyclad is Bipalium. The nematodes such as Rhabditis, Diplogaster, Tylenchus, Heterodora, Aphelenchoids, Monanchus, Pradolenchus, Ziphinema and Criconemoids, abound by as much as 1 to 3 million in raw humus soils to 20 million per meter in grassland soils. 2. Microflora. The microflora of soil includes bacteria, soil fungi, soil actinomycetes, blue-green algae and algae. In soil, microflora bacteria form about 90% of the total population. Fungi and algae together represent 1% and actinomycetes cover only 9%. Soil bacteria grow fairly well in the neutral soils richly supplied with organic nutrients. Soil inhabitant bacteria fall into categories, namely, autotrophic bacteria and heterotrophic bacteria. The autotrophic bacteria derive their energy from the oxidation of simple carbon compounds or from inorganic substances and their carbon from the atmospheric CO. The common autotrophic bacteria of soil are nitrifying bacteria, hydrogen bacteria, sulfur bacteria, iron bacteria, manganese bacteria, carbon monoxide bacteria and methane bacteria. Most of soil bacteria are heterotrophic bacteria depending upon the organic matter of soil for Their energy source and are primarily concerned with the decomposition of cellulose and other carbohydrates, proteins, fats and waxes. They bring about mineralization of organic matter of soil and release considerable amount of nitrogen, phosphorus and other nutrients for plants. The common nitrogen-fixing bacteria of soil or rhizobium occurs in root nodules of leguminous plants, Azotobacter and Clostridium pasturionum, the latter two are free occurring in soil. Nematodes such as Rhabditis are found in raw humus soils. Majority of soil fungi are found in acidic soils. They may be parasitic, saprophytic and symbiotic. Parasitic fungi of soil infect florets No, Javule, H. Clai, Lint VTI, JCSH roots of plants and cause plant diseases such as cotton root rot and many are nitrogen-fixing bacteria, kinds of wilts, rusts, blights and smuts. Certain wilt-forming fungi produce toxins which are harmful, for example, Fusarium leni, which causes wilt of flax LC, and secretes HCN, and Fusarium udum, a fungus causing wilt of pigeon pea Arhar, secretes fusaric acid in the roots of host plants. However, certain parasitic fungi produce growth-stimulating substances for host plant. Fusarium sp, for example, have been found to secrete gibberellin and gibberellic acid C, GH0. Symbiotic fungi of soil live on the roots of certain plants and both fungus and plants are benefited. Saprophytic fungi depend on dead organic matter of soil and derive the energy from decomposition of the latter. They break down cellulose, lignin, and gum, sugars, starch, protein, etc., into simple gradients to be utilized by higher plants as nutrients. Actinomycete fungi prefer saline soils and bring about the decomposition of organic matter such as cellulose. They produce a variety of antibiotics of great economic significance for man. The most important blue-green algae of soil are those which fix nitrogen in soil. Anabaena, nostoc, microcystis are important nitrogen-fixing blue-green algae of soil. They also make soil aggregates because of having mucilage. 3. Mesofauna. Mesofauna include animals with body size within the range 200 pm to 1 cm. The microarthropods acari, mites, and collembola, springtails, are important members of this group which also include the larger nematodes, rotifers, and tardigrades, together with most of the isopods, arachnida, spiders, chelognathi, pseudoscorpions, apiliones, harvestmen, enchytraidae, potworms, insect larvae and small millipedes, diplopoda, isopods and mollusks. Among annelids the microscopic enchytrades are represented by Enchytraeus fridericia and Acheta lumbricalis, which are more abundant in organic soils and forests than in grassland. Oniscus, Percelia, and Armadillium are the most common isopods, crustacean, of the tropics in the humid zone. Among the soil arachnids, mites are the most predominant. Mites flourish in moist organic soils and certain mites such as Gallimna, Cepheus, Oniscus. Hemerobates occur in lichens and mosses. Certain mites, such as Chelorbates and Brachychthornis live in humus. The mites are saprophagous, predatory and phytophagous and are involved in the process of organic decomposition and its resultant processes. Certain arachnids such as scorpions, the Liphonis, Galliodes, and some spiders are crepuscular, hiding under rocks or in crevices in soil and in loose litter, and has no ecological significance in decomposition like other arachnids. Many apiliones or harvestmen occur in forest litter, frequently preying upon soil organisms. Besides mites, only the pseudoscorpions are Chelognathi occur in surface soils and most decaying vegetations. Of the xerophile litter inhabitants are Stenatumnus indicus, Danus indicus, Phila indica and the hygrophile inhabitants living in the litter and under stones are Compsognathus indica, Tyrannocthonius madracensis, Tyrannocchethonius chelatus and Hygrochelifer indicus, Murphy, 1964 feeding on collembola, enchytrades, etc. The common millipedes are diplopods of forest soil which are chief decomposers of soils are Spirostreptus, Thyropigus, Glomeris, Arthrosphera, Polydesmus, Iulus, etc. Tardigrades or bare animalcules occur in surface layer of most soils in grassland being represented by the Macrobiotis and Hypsobius. Among insects, Apterygote collembola form numerically the most important groups of soil insects. Other insects such as Dermaptera, Socoptera, Dictyoptera, Isoptera, Coleoptera, a few Hymenoptera and some Diptera also occur in soil, sometimes as juveniles. The termites such as reticuloterms and odontoterms are important soil dwellers of tropics and play an important role in the breakup of organic materials and their mixing up with mineral soils. Among the Hymenoptera, ants are the most important soil-dwelling forms. Among Collembola, Onchiridae, Isotomidae, Peduridae and Entomobridae are richly represented in the soil both in number and species composition. Large-sized Collembola such as Tomoceras, Entomobria and Orchizella occur in surface layer, whilst smaller Onychirus, Tulbergia, etc., occur in deeper layers of soils. A dung beetle rolling away a ball of dung. This will provide the beetle and its young with food. Among Dipleura, Anogipix, Gipix and Campodia are often found in small numbers in moist soils under stones and in humus. Proterans are more abundant than Dipleura and very common in moist forest and grassland soils which abound in species of Eosintomen, Aceratomen and Acerantulus. 4. Macrofauna of soil. Macrofauna of soil includes those animals whose body size is greater than 1 cm. Here belong the majority of Lumbricidae, the mollusca, the largest insects and arachnids and the soil-dwelling vertebrates. Earthworms usually occur in abundance in alkaline and moist soils and sparse in acid soils. They have been proverbial for their influence on the process of decomposition of organic materials, breaking up litter earthworm A, and wood ants B, help make fragments and mixing them thoroughly with mineral soils, the soil fertile. They do this by constantly resulting in the formation of organic soils. Some of the creaking up debris on the forest floor. Common Indian and Aledan species of soil are Megascolex, Ferrotima, Octochetus, Drawita and Monologaster. Among chilopods the carnivorous Scolopendra and Lithobius are common in moist soils feeding on leaf litter inhabitants. Among soil vertebrates, following animals are well adapted for burrowing life in soils: Ichthyophis, Cocopus systema, Breviceps amphibia, Sphenodon, Uromastyx, limbless lizards and snakes Reptilia talpa, Dossiurus, Notorix and various insectivores and rodents Mammalia. Adaptations of soil animals. Animals which are adapted for digging the burrows and for subterranean mode of life are called fossorial animals. These animals may dig either for their food or simply for retreat. Zoologically they are primitive, defenseless and unambitious animals. They have following adaptations. 1. The body contour is either cylindrical, e.g., Ichthyophis, limbless lizards, snakes, earthworms, Scolopendra, etc., or spindle-shaped or fusiform, e.g., Talpa, Echidna, etc., so as to offer least resistance to subterranean passage. 2. The mole is almost blind. Sensitive whiskers and a good sense of smell are more useful than eyesight underground. Powerful feet and claws are used by mole to dig through soil. Head tapers anteriorly to form a sort of snout for burrowing. 3. The tail is short or vestigial. 4. The eyes tend to become vestigial as they are of no use in dark habitat. 5. The external ears also tend to disappear since they would be obstructing in burrowing. 6. For digging, many structures may be found in different fossorial animals, e.g., hands, are well adapted for digging. In the insect Gryllatalpa, the forelegs are modified for digging purpose. The ground-dwelling animals which may be cursorial running, such as ostrich, rhea, ungulates, wolves, cats, bears, hyenas, etc., saltatory jumping, such as rodents, rabbits, wallabies, kangaroos, etc., or graviportal heavy, such as turtles, armadillos, elephants, hippopotami, etc., exhibit different kinds of adaptations for different kinds of soils. For example, if the soil is firm and hard, the large animals inhabiting the ecosystem tend to have small hooves or paws. If the soil is wet and spongy, they tend to have broad hooves or paws. RUAARI O by ORU1RN. Non-living elements in an environment comprise the abiotic components of our ecosystem. Abiotic environmental factors. Environment of an organism has two components, abiotic and biotic. The first includes the atmosphere, air, hydrosphere, water, and lithosphere, land including soil. The abiotic components are characterized by physical and chemical factors such as light, temperature, rainfall, pressure, pH, the content of oxygen and other gases, and so on. These factors exhibit diurnal, nocturnal, seasonal, and annual changes. The biotic components include all living organisms which interact with each other and with the abiotic components. Earth's living organisms interacting with their physical or abiotic environment, including air, land and water, form a giant and vast ecosystem, called ecosphere or biosphere, which is largest and most nearly self-sufficient biological system. In physical terms, the biosphere is a relatively thin and incomplete envelope covering most of the world. It represents a mosaic of different biotic communities from simple to complex, aquatic to terrestrial, and tropical to polar. It does not exist in the extremities of the polar regions, the highest mountains, the deepest ocean troughs, the most extreme deserts, or the most highly polluted areas of land and water. Its total thickness, including all portions of the Earth where living organisms can exist, is less than 26 kilometers. Its zone of active biological production, in terms of photosynthesis, is much narrower, and varies from a few centimeters to over 100 meters. This zone would, for instance, be only a few centimeters in muddy or turbid water, whereas in very clear ocean water, it could be more than 100 meters in thickness. On the biosphere, 3 years of satellite data were combined to produce this picture of the Earth's biological productivity. Rainforests and other highly productive areas appear as dark green, deserts as yellow. The concentration of phytoplankton, a primary indicator of ocean productivity, is represented by a scale that runs from red, highest, to orange, yellow, green, and blue, lowest. Land, the zone of biological production might be only a few millimeters in a desert or rock environment, whereas it might again be more than 100 meters in a sequoia or tropical rainforest. Types of abiotic environmental factors. The distribution, abundance, growth and reproduction of the organisms comprising the individual members of populations are controlled by certain environmental or ecological factors. An environmental factor is any external force, substance or condition which surrounds and affects the life of an organism in any way. Abiotic environmental factors are customarily classified as follows. 1. Climatic factors, i. light. E. Temperature. E. Water, including atmospheric water, rainfall or precipitation, soil moisture, etc. IV. Atmosphere, gases and wind. V. Fire. 2. Topographic or physiographic factors, i. altitude. E. Direction of mountain chains and valleys. E. Steepness and exposure of slopes. 3. Adaphic factors, soil formation, physical and chemical properties of soil, nutrients. Essential EIEMENTS and limiting factor RS. The individual organisms of species population, in order to grow and multiply, must be supplied with certain essential materials. Of the 104 i.e., 104 naturally occurring chemical elements on the Earth, all living organisms are believed to utilize only 16 different chemical elements for their survival. These are called essential elements. Several other elements are needed in small quantities by some species. They are summarized in Table 4:1. Essential elements. Source: Clapham, 1973. Macronutrients, micronutrients, element. Some of these tabulated elements are used in relatively large quantities as the fundamental building blocks of organic tissues and are called macronutrients. Others, the micronutrients, are used in much smaller quantities. The micronutrients are also known as trace elements. For instance, a crop such as corn will remove over 45 kg of nitrogen per acre from the soil but only 10 to 15 g of boron. In addition to the nutrients required by all species, some organisms have special nutrient requirements. Liebig-Blackman law of limiting factors. An organism is seldom, if ever, exposed solely to the effect of a single factor in its environment. On the contrary, an organism is subjected to the simultaneous action of all factors in its immediate surroundings. However, some factors exert more influence than do others, and the attempt to evaluate their relative roles had led to the development of the law of the minimum by the German biochemist Justus Liebig in 1840. Liebig, while investigating the relationship between the available amounts of essential elements and plant growth, discovered that crop yield was frequently limited by elements other than those utilized in the largest quantity. Freely translated, a part of his statement on his experimental results is that growth is dependent on the amount of foodstuff that is present in corn. Minimum quantity. This statement has come to be known as Liebig's law of minimum. It is now usually incorporated with a law of limiting factors developed by a British physiologist F. F. Blackman, 1905, who at the beginning of this century investigated factors affecting the rate of photosynthesis. He listed 5 factors involved in controlling rate of photosynthesis: amount of CO available, amount of HO available, intensity of solar radiation, amount of chlorophyll present, and temperature of the chloroplast. Blackman discovered that the rate of photosynthesis is governed by the level of the factor that is operating at a limiting intensity. Further work on limiting factors and substances has shown that a high level of one factor will modify the limiting effect of a second, a process described as factor interaction. Shelford, 1932. The same principle of limiting factors applies well to animal functions. The law of minimum has been restated by Taylor, 1934, in broad ecological terms, as follows: the functioning of an organism is controlled or limited by that essential environmental factor or combination of factors present in the least favorable amount. The factors may not be continuously effective but only at some critical period during the year or perhaps only during some critical year in a climatic cycle. THRESHOID and rate. Every environmental factor varies through a wider range of intensity than any single organism can tolerate characteristically. For each individual organism there is present a lower and an upper limit in the range of an environmental factor between which it functions efficiently. For any one factor, different organisms find optimal conditions for existence at different points along the range, hence their segregation into different habitats. The threshold is the minimum quantity of any factor that produces a precipitable effect on the organism. It may be the lowest temperature at which an animal remains active, the least amount of moisture in the soil that permits growth of a plant, the minimum intensity of light at which photoreceptor is stimulated, and so forth. Above the threshold, the rate of a function increases more or less rapidly as the quantity of heat, moisture, light or other environmental factor is increased, until a maximum rate is attained. Above the maximum, there is usually a decline in the rate of a process either because of deleterious effect produced, the interference of some other factor or exhaustion. Sheaford's IAW of tolerance. Organisms may be limited in their growth and their occurrence not only by too little of an element or too low an intensity of a factor but also by too much of the element or too high intensity of the factor. For example, carbon dioxide is necessary for the growth of all green plants. Small increase in lower limit upper limit of concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere will, under certain circumstances, increase the rate of plant growth, but very considerable increases become toxic. Likewise, small additions of arsenic to the human diet actually have a tonic effect. Further increase in the dosage, however, soon proves fatal. The idea that factors could be limiting at their maximum as well as minimum quantities was incorporated in law of tolerance formulated by V. E. Shelford in 1913. This law postulates that each ecological factor to which an organism responds has maximum and minimum limiting effect between which lies a range or gradient that is now known as the limits of tolerance. Between the lower and upper limits of tolerance lies a broad middle sector of a gradient which is called the zone of compatibility, the zone of tolerance, the biokinetics zone or the zone of capacity adaptation. The region at either end of the zone of compatibility is called the lethal zone or the zone of resistance or zone of intolerance. The zone of compatibility too includes a broad range of optimum and narrow zones of physiological stresses in between the range of optimum and lethal zones. Upper and lower limits of tolerance are intensity levels of a factor at which only half of the organisms can survive. These limits are sometimes difficult to determine, as for example with low temperature, organisms may pass into an inactive, dormant, or hibernating state from which they may again become functional when the temperature rises above a threshold. At high temperatures, there may be similar inactivation or estivation before the lethal level is attained. Even without dormancy occurring, there are normally zones of physiological stresses before the limits of tolerance are reached. The species as a whole is limited in its activities more by conditions that produce physiological discomforts or stresses than it is by the limits of tolerance themselves. Death comes close to the limits of tolerance, and the existence of the species would be seriously risked if it was frequently exposed to these extreme conditions. Therefore, in retreat before conditions of physiological stress there is a margin of safety, and the species adjusts its activities so that limits of tolerance are avoided. There is a variation in hardiness of individuals within a species, so that some hardy individuals find existence possible under conditions that disturb other individuals. The population level of a species becomes reduced before the limits of its range are actually reached. Further, species vary in their limits of tolerance to the same factor. For example, the Atlantic salmon spends most of its adult life in the sea, but goes annually into freshwater streams to breed. Most other marine fishes are killed quickly when placed in freshwater, as are freshwater fishes when placed in saltwater. The following terms, Table 4-2, are used to indicate the relative extent to which organisms can tolerate variation in environmental factors. The prefix steno means that the species, population, or individual has a narrow range of tolerance, and the prefix uri indicates that it has a wide range. Table 4-2. Terminology for ranges of certain abiotic environmental factors. Stenothermal urothermal pertaining to temperature, stenohaline. Urahaline pertaining to salinity, stenohydric. Urihydric pertaining to water, stenophagic. Uriphagic pertaining to food, stenobathic. Uribathic pertaining to depth. Stenoecious, Uriecious pertaining to niche or habitat selection. Moreover, a plant or animal may have a wide range of tolerance for one factor in the environment, but a relatively narrow range of tolerance for another condition. Thus, we find that some species of freshwater fishes are urothermal but they are stenohaline. Lastly, though climatic, edaphic and biotic factors affect plants, animals, their populations and community growth and dynamics take place in a holistic manner, but it is difficult to understand the mechanism of environmental influences unless we study the different components of environment separately as follows. 1. Lighthand radiations. The radiant energy from the sun is the basic requirement for the existence of life on the Earth. This source of energy is of fundamental importance to the photosynthetic production of food by plants, and as mentioned previously, the heat budget of the world is dependent on solar radiation. Although we generally think only in terms of visible light, the sun emits other radiations of different wavelengths: cosmic rays, gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet rays, infrared rays, heat waves, spark discharges, radar. High energy, low energy, short wave, along length, wavelength. Y-E. Far. X-rays, ultraviolet, IWIOEIES, weaves. TV, radio. Weaves, WEVIES. Cosmic, gamma. Rays, rays. 0 trademark 10 inches 10 degrees registered 1077 10 degrees 10 degrees 10 degree 107,001. Back into space. The sun is a gigantic nuclear fusion reactor that gives off a wide spectrum of radiant energy into space. When this energy reaches the Earth, much of it is either reflected or absorbed by chemicals in the atmosphere, which prevents most of the harmful, high-energy cosmic rays, gamma rays, X-rays, and far ultraviolet ionizing radiation from reaching the Earth's surface. Waves, radio waves, slow electromagnetic waves. Biologists have been primarily interested in only 3 regions near the center of the electromagnetic spectrum: 1. The infrared, 2. The visible light, and 3. Ultraviolet regions. The infrared wavelengths, which are the longest visible. UV infrared. Off these 3 are not visible to the human eye, they contribute to the warmth of the Earth at the high GH altitudes. In the 100 equals I, UI terrestrial. Mols, bioluminescence, periodicities of occurrence and periods of inactivity. Unlike temperature, light is an lethal ecological factor, and it has a specific direction in its flow. The wavelength of ultraviolet light from the sun is shorter than that of visible light, and it produces the upper levels of the Earth known as the ionosphere. Light receptors of animals. Since animals depend on light for orientation, diurnal migrations, and synchrony of rhythmic activities, light reception probably is the most important sensory modality in the exploration of the environment. It is not surprising, therefore, that receptors for light are common to almost all animals. In those with better developed photoreceptors, light greatly influences behavior. Light receptors may be well-defined organs such as the vertebrate eyes, the compound eyes of crustacea and insects, the simple eyes or ocelli of other arthropods and invertebrates, and the dermal light receptors. Many homeotherm animals with normal vision do not commonly respond to ultraviolet or infrared rays, since their retinas are not stimulated. They also do not properly distinguish between the different colors of the visible spectrum. Dogs, cats, hamsters, and opossums are colorblind, while horned cattle cannot identify red light. Horses, deer, sheep, pigs, and squirrels cannot distinguish close to red and green. Primates can distinguish colors. The wavelength of ultraviolet light from the sun is shorter than that of visible light, and it produces the upper levels of the Earth known as the ionosphere. Light receptors of animals. Since animals depend on light for orientation, diurnal migrations, and synchrony of rhythmic activities, light reception probably is the most important sensory modality in the exploration of the environment. It is not surprising, therefore, that receptors for light are common to almost all animals. In those with better developed photoreceptors, light greatly influences behavior. Light receptors may be well-defined organs such as the vertebrate eyes, the compound eyes of crustacea and insects, the simple eyes or ocelli of other arthropods and invertebrates, and the dermal light receptors. Many homeotherm animals with normal vision do not commonly respond to ultraviolet or infrared rays, since their retinas are not stimulated. They also do not properly distinguish between the different colors of the visible spectrum. Dogs, cats, hamsters, and opossums are colorblind, while horned cattle cannot identify red light. Horses, deer, sheep, pigs and squirrels cannot distinguish close to red and green. Primates can distinguish colors. Some insects such as Ashonibi can see ultraviolet radiation. Primates can distinguish colors. Light variations in different environments. Light energy varies with different media. The transparency of air and water is important in regulating the amount and quantity of light that may be available in particular habitats. For example, the intensity of light reaching the Earth's surface varies with the angle of incidence, degree of latitude and altitude, season, time of day, amount absorbed and dispersed by atmosphere, and a number of climatic and topographical factors such as fog, clouds, suspended water drops, dust particles, etc. When the angle of incidence is smaller, light rays have to travel by a longer distance through the atmosphere, which results into relative reduction in intensity. Likewise, sun's altitude changes due to differences in latitude, changes in the season and in the time of day. When sun remains overhead, the intensity of sunlight over the Earth's surface will be greatest. At higher latitudes, the intensity of light becomes correspondingly reduced. The illumination or intensity of daylight is greatly diminished by moisture, clouds, and dust in the atmosphere and also by forest vegetation. The direction and slope of the mountain also affect light intensity. There will be no light on the one side of the slope. Illumination is measured in lux or foot candle. 1 foot candle is 10.7 lux. 1 lux is equal to 1 lumen per square meter. A lumen is equal to 1/620th watt. Most organisms respond to moonlight, particularly on a full moon, which has an illumination of 0.25 lux in cloudless weather. The light which enters in the aquatic media comes from sun by passing through the atmosphere existing above the water surface, and hence, that is subjected to all kinds of atmospheric factors like that of terrestrial media. About 10% of the sunlight which falls over the water surface is reflected back and rest 90% of that pass downward in the water and is is 10.7 lux. Primates can distinguish colors. Light variations in different environments. Light energy varies with different media. The transparency of air and water is important in regulating the amount and quantity of light that may be available in particular habitats. For example, the intensity of light reaching the Earth's surface varies with the angle of incidence, degree of latitude and altitude, season, time of day, amount absorbed and dispersed by atmosphere, and a number of climatic and topographical factors such as fog, clouds, suspended water drops, dust particles, etc. When the angle of incidence is smaller, light rays have to travel by a longer distance through the atmosphere, which results into relative reduction in intensity. Likewise, sun's altitude changes due to differences in latitude, changes in the season and in the time of day. When sun remains overhead, the intensity of sunlight over the Earth's surface will be greatest. At higher latitudes, the intensity of light becomes correspondingly reduced. The illumination or intensity of daylight is greatly diminished by moisture, clouds, and dust in the atmosphere and also by forest vegetation. The direction and slope of the mountain also affect light intensity. There will be no light on the one side of the slope. Illumination is measured in lux or foot candle. 1 foot candle is 10.7 lux. 1 lux is equal to 1 lumen per square meter. A lumen is equal to 1/620th watt. Most organisms respond to moonlight, particularly on a full moon, which has an illumination of 0.25 lux in cloudless weather. The light which enters in the aquatic media comes from sun by passing through the atmosphere existing above the water surface, and hence, that is subjected to all kinds of atmospheric factors like that of terrestrial media. About 10% of the sunlight which falls over the water surface is reflected back and rests 90% of that pass downward in the water and is modified in respect phylophora to intensity, spectral composition, angular distribution, refraction, and time distribution. The phytoplankton, zooplankton, suspended organic and inorganic particles either reflect or absorb the light rays. Further, in water there is a selective absorption of light at various depths. The longer light rays are absorbed near the surface, and in general the shortest light rays penetrate deepest. Thus, long infrared rays are absorbed in the upper layers of water, about 4 meters. Red and orange rays are completely absorbed up to the depth of 20 meters. Yellow rays penetrate up to 50 meters, and green and blue rays penetrate up to 80 to 100 meters deep. Violet and ultraviolet rays penetrate beyond 100 meters, and no light ray penetrates beyond 200 meters depth. Depending upon the penetration of light, oceans are divided into euphotic zone up to 50 meters depth, dysphotic zone up to 80 to 200 meters depth, and aphotic zone below 200 meters of depth. In the ocean, algae are distributed according to length of light rays that their colors are best suited to absorb and to utilize. Photosynthesis in deeper waters occurs with blue and green rays, which are absorbed by the brown and red pigments of red algae Philophora. The red and blue-green algae use pigments of photocyanin and photoerythrin for photosynthesis. Each plant performs optimum photosynthesis in complementary colors, e.g., green pigment for red rays, brown pigment for green rays, and red pigment for blue rays. Further, since the photosynthesis is a function of the illumination, a variation in the amplitude of which depends on the Earth's rotation, altitude, season, presence or absence of clouds and dust and so on. Effect of light on the plants. Light energy influences almost all the aspects of plant life directly or indirectly. Thus, it controls plants' structure, form, shape, physiology, growth, reproduction, development, local distribution, etc. On the basis of light factors, certain ecologists have classified plants into scheophytes, shade-loving, or photophobic plants which have best growth under lower intensities of light, and heliophytes or photophilous plants which have best growth in full sunlight. The light factor affects following aspects of plant life. A. Direct effects of light on plants. Light affects directly the following physiological processes of the plants. 1. It is an essential factor in the formation of chlorophyll pigment in chlorophyllous plants. 2. It has a very strong influence on the number and position of chloroplasts. The upper part of the leaf which receives full sunshine has larger number of chloroplasts which are arranged in line with the direction of light. In leaves of plants which grow under shade, chloroplasts are very few in number and are arranged at right angle to the light rays, thus, increasing the surface of light absorption. 3. Light has its most significant role in photosynthesis. During photosynthesis, the green plants, which are the primary producers of an ecosystem, synthesize their carbohydrate food from water and Colorado, in the presence of sunlight. Thus, during photosynthesis, the solar radiant energy is transformed into the chemical or molecular energy which remains stored in chemical bonds of carbohydrates, and this chemical energy is utilized by other chlorophyllous and non-chlorophyllous parts of plants, all animals, bacteria and viruses in their different life activities. The rate of photosynthesis is greater in intermittent light than in the continuous light. At high intensity of light, a photooxidation of chlorophylls and other enzymes takes place, which consequently reduces the rate of synthesis of carbohydrates and proteins. However, high intensity of light results in the formation of anthocyanin pigments. It is for this reason alpine plants have beautifully colored flowers. 4. Light inhibits the production of auxins or growth hormones, as a result of which it influences the shape and sizes of plants. Plants grown in insufficient light or in the total darkness produce maximum amount of growth hormones, as a result of which they are elongated with weak pale yellow stems with very few branches. 5. Light also influences certain chemical compounds of plants which affect the differentiation of specialized tissues and organs. 6. Leaf structure too is influenced by the intensity of light. 7. The development of flowers, fruits and seeds is greatly affected by light intensity. Diffused light or reduced light promotes the development of vegetative structures and causes delicacy. For example, vegetative crops such as turnips, carrots, potato and beets give highest yield in regions with high percentage of cloudy days. Intense light favors the development of flowers, fruits and seeds. 8. Duration of light is also very important. Actual duration or length of the day photoperiod is a significant factor in the growth and flowering of a wide variety of plants. The controlling effect of photoperiod is called photoperiodicity. According to the response to length of photoperiods, the plants have been classified into following 3 groups. I. Short day plants, which bloom when the light duration is less than 12 hours per day, e.g., Nicotiana tabacum, tobacco, Dahlia variabilis, Chrysanthemum indicum, Cosmos bipinnatus, Cannabis sativa, hemp, etc. E. Long day plants, which bloom when the light duration is more than 12 hours per day, e.g., Allium cepa, onion, Beta vulgaris, beetroot, Daucus carota, carrot, Papaver somniferum, opium poppy, Vicia faba, broad bean, Brassica rapa, turnip, Avena sativa, oat, Sicale cereal, rye, sorghum vulgar, sorghum, etc. E. Day neutral plants, which show little response to length of day light, e.g., Cucumis sativus, cucumber, Gossypium hirsutum, cotton, solanum, tuberosum, potato, etc. 9. Light also affects the movement in some plants. The effect of sunlight on the plant movement is called heliotropism or phototropism. The stems elongate towards light, positive phototropism, and the roots are negatively phototropic. The leaves grow transversely to the path of light. 10. The seeds when moist are very sensitive to light. In some cases the germination of seed cystillate in light. 11. Light is an important factor in the distribution of roots or negative belly stems or posit equals ively plants. Some plants grow in full sunlight, phototropic, while others prefer to grow in the shades. B. Indirect effects of light on plants. Light affects opening and closing of stomata, influences the permeability of plasma membrane and has heating effect. All these in turn affect transpiration, which in turn affects absorption of water. Light affects respiration of plants indirectly, as in the presence of light the respiratory substrates are synthesized. In many plants the respiratory rate increases with the increase in the light intensity, e.g., canna, nerium, bougainvillea. However, in certain plants respiration rate is decreased slightly in intense light. Effects of light on animals. Light affects divergent aspects of animals' life. It influences cellular metabolism, growth, pigmentation, locomotion, reproduction, ontogenetic development, and also controls the periodicity and biological clocks of animals. Some of its significant effects can be discussed as follows. 1. Effect of light on protoplasm. Though the bodies of most animals remain protected by some sort of body covering which save animal tissues from the lethal effects of solar radiations. But, sometimes sun rays penetrate such covers and cause excitation, activation, ionization and heating of protoplasm of different body cells. Ultraviolet rays are known to cause mutational changes in the DNA of various organisms. 2. Effect of light on metabolism. The metabolic rate of different animals is greatly influenced by light. The increased intensity of light results in an increase in enzyme activity, general metabolic rate and solubility of salts and minerals in the protoplasm. Solubility of gases, however, decreases at high light intensity. Cave-dwelling animals are found to be sluggish in their habits and to contain slow rate of metabolism. 3. Effect of light on pigmentation. Light influences pigmentation in animals. Cave animals lack skin pigments. If they are kept out of darkness for a long time, they regain skin pigmentation. The darkly pigmented skin of human inhabitants of the tropics also indicate the effect of sunlight on skin pigmentation. The skin pigment synthesis is dependent on the sunlight. Light also determines the characteristic patterns of pigments of different animals which serve the animals in sexual dimorphism and protective coloration. Animals that dwell in the depths of the ocean where the environment is monotonous, though pigmented, do not show patterns in their coloration. 4. Effect of light on animal movements. The influence of light on the movement of animals is evident in lower animals. Oriented locomotory movements towards and away from a source of light is called phototaxis. Positively phototactic animals such as Euglena, Ranitra, etc., move towards the source of light, while negatively phototactic animals such as planarians, earthworms, slugs, copepods, siphonophores, etc., move away from the source of light. The light-directed growth mechanisms are called phototropisms which occur in sessile animals. Phototropisms also include responsive movement of some body part of some active animals to the light stimulus, such as the movement of flagellum of Euglena towards light and movements of polyps of many colinterrates. The velocity or speed of the movement of certain animals is also regulated by light. It has been observed that animals when responding to light reduce their velocity of movement, and these movements which are non-directional are called photokinesis. Photokinesis may be a change in linear velocity, rheokinesis, or in the direction of turning, clinokinesis. During photokinesis, when only a part of the body of an animal deviates away from the source of light, the reaction is termed photoclinokinesis. Larvae of Musca domestica show such movements. When animals are confronted with two lights of equal brightness, they move towards or away to a position that is distance between the two lights. This is termed phototropataxis. Attraction of males towards the flash of the female is called teletaxis. Movement of animals at a constant angle towards the source of light is called light compass reaction or celestial orientation. Celestial orientation. Some organisms, particularly arthropods, birds and fish, utilize their time sense as an aid to find their way from one area to another. To orient themselves, the animals use the sun, moon, or stars as a compass. To do this, they utilize both their biological clock and observations on the azimuthal position of the sun in relation to an established direction. The azimuth is the angle between a fixed line on the Earth's surface and a projection of the sun's direction on the surface. Using the sun as a reference point involves some problems for animals because the sun moves. The target angle changes throughout the day. But animals which use the sun as aeroference correct their orientation somehow. Such celestial orientation has been observed in fishes, turtles, lizards, most birds, and such invertebrates as ants, bees, wolf spiders, and sandhoppers. 5. Photoperiodism and biological clocks, biorhythms. During evolution, organisms have acquired a variety of endogenous rhythms. Their periods are matched with the rhythmic events in the environment. A rhythm is a recurring process which is wave-like in character, because maximum and minimum states appear at identical intervals of time. The time taken between two maxima, peaks, or two minima, troughs, is called a period or cycle and consists of two phases, a rise and fall in the biological process. The amplitude is the range of fluctuations from an average value. The response of different organisms to environmental rhythms of light and darkness is termed photoperiodism. Each daily cycle inclusive of a period of illumination followed by a period of darkness is called the photoperiod. The term photophase and scatophase are sometimes used to denote the period of light and the period of darkness respectively. Some rhythms of organisms are matched to 24 hours cycle of light and dark, circadian, other to the 12.4 or 24.8 hours tide cycle, circadial, the 29 days lunar cycle, circalinar or circasynodic, the yearly seasons. Some rhythms of organisms are matched to 24 hours cycle of light and dark, circadian, other to the 12.4 or 24.8 hours tide cycle, circadial, the 29 days lunar cycle, circalinar or circasynodic, the yearly seasons. Light and movements of polyps of many colinterrates. The velocity or speed of the movement of certain animals is also regulated by light. It has been observed that animals when responding to light reduce their velocity of movement, and these movements which are non-directional are called photokinesis. Photokinesis may be a change in linear velocity, rheokinesis, or in the direction of turning, clinokinesis. During photokinesis, when only a part of the body of an animal deviates away from the source of light, the reaction is termed photoclinokinesis. Larvae of Musca domestica show such movements. When animals are confronted with two lights of equal brightness, they move towards or away to a position that is distance between the two lights. This is termed phototropataxis. Attraction of males towards the flash of the female is called teletaxis. Movement of animals at a constant angle towards the source of light is called light compass reaction or celestial orientation. Celestial orientation. Some organisms, particularly arthropods, birds and fish, utilize their time sense as an aid to find their way from one area to another. To orient themselves, the animals use the sun, moon, or stars as a compass. To do this, they utilize both their biological clock and observations on the azimuthal position of the sun in relation to an established direction. The azimuth is the angle between a fixed line on the Earth's surface and a projection of the sun's direction on the surface. Using the sun as a reference point involves some problems for animals because the sun moves. The target angle changes throughout the day. But animals which use the sun as aeroference correct their orientation somehow. Such celestial orientation has been observed in fishes, turtles, lizards, most birds, and such invertebrates as ants, bees, wolf spiders, and sandhoppers. 5. Photoperiodism and biological clocks, biorhythms. During evolution, organisms have acquired a variety of endogenous rhythms. Their periods are matched with the rhythmic events in the environment. A rhythm is a recurring process which is wave-like in character, because maximum and minimum states appear at identical intervals of time. The time taken between two maxima peaks or two minima troughs is called a period or cycle and consists of two phases, a rise and fall in the biological process. The amplitude is the range of fluctuations from an average value. The response of different organisms to environmental rhythms of light and darkness is termed photoperiodism. Each daily cycle inclusive of a period of illumination followed by a period of darkness is called the photoperiod. The term photophase and scatophase are sometimes used to denote the period of light and the period of darkness respectively. Some rhythms of organisms are matched to 24 hours cycle of light and dark, circadian, other to the 12.4 or 24.8 hours tide cycle, circadial, the 29 days lunar cycle, circalinar or circasynodic, the yearly seasons, circannular, or the time between successive spring low waters, 14.7 days, semilunar or circasyzygic. Prefixing word circa, which means about, with most types of biological rhythms is very necessary because all these internal clocks are only approximately matched, e.g., 24 hours cycle. Prefixing word circa, which means about, with most types of biological rhythms is very necessary because all these internal clocks are only approximately matched, e.g., 24 hours cycle or rhythm does not mean 24 hours by wristwatch, it means about 24 hour or circadian, L circa equals about plus D, M equals day. This term was coined by an American ethologist Franz Halberg in 1959. Now it is believed that all animals, and also plants, possess an internal, endogenous, an automatic clock that controls the rhythm of behavior and keeps it going with the help of internal stimuli. This clock is entrained, i.e., set and reset by external environmental stimuli, called zeitgebers or entrainers such as day length, lunar phases, tides, temperature, humidity, etc. The biological clocks show following general characteristics. 1. They keep almost the same timings at high and low temperatures, i.e., they are unaffected by metabolic inhibitors which are known to block biochemical reactions. 3. They are controlled by the physiological processes of body. 4. They keep normal cycle even in the absence of environmental cues and are self-sustained in nature. 5. They function through nerves, brain, and hormones. Types of biorhythms. 1. Circadian rhythms. Operating on an approximately 24-hour day-night cycle of the Earth's rotation, they are the most studied and well-understood biological clocks. Or biorhythms. They are found in almost all the major taxonomic groups of animal kingdom. In their simplest form, circadian rhythms are reflected in the alternating periods of activity and sleep, which correlate with the light-dark cycle. In this evening primrose, chicory cycle, some animals remain most active at sunrise and sunset times. Such animals are known as crepuscular. Some animals are active during the night, nocturnal, but most animals are active during the daytime. They are called diurnal. In the diurnal rhythm, the animal activity stage includes small cycles of flitting, flying, running and rest. Among plants showing diurnal rhythm, the flowers of some plants open up before the break of dawn, e.g., at 4 to 5 a.m. in dogrose, chicory and poppy, and in some others, with the onset of dusk, e.g., evening primrose, poppy, matronalis, etc. In fact, when a flower closes up, it does so to protect its inner organs from the cold of the night and against extra moisture. In the day, flowers open up for pollination under most favorable conditions. Such periodic change in the position of the organs, viz., petals and leaves, is called sleep. Such sort of movements of plant organs are called nyctinastic movements. Circadian rhythms also have been observed in metabolic rates, cell division, growth, heartbeat, rate of photosynthesis, cellular enzyme activity and a host of other activities. 2. Circadial rhythms. The biological rhythms synchronized with the low and high tides, i.e., the alternate rise and fall of the sea due to gravitational pull exerted by moon in the sea, are called circadial rhythms. Thus, the organisms living in the intertidal zone of the seashore are alternately submerged in water and exposed to air, and in doing this, these animals become exposed to various ecofactors such as pressure, salinity, food supply, temperature and risk of predation. Animals inhabiting tidal areas show behavioral periodicity associated with the tides. For example, bivalve mollusks, e.g., pearl oysters, increase filtration rates when high tide brings in more food, and sea anemones increase the rate of body expansion and contraction during high tide, waving its tentacles actively to trap more food. 3. Circalinar rhythms. Biological rhythms which are synchronized with the phases of moon are called circalinar rhythms. For example, Amarine polychaete platanaris dumaris, a long worm-like non-sexual creature which lives in a burrow. During its breeding season, this seaworm becomes brilliantly colorful, gets bigger in size, its parapodia, eyes and tentacles also get enlarged, and it becomes a sexual form called heteroneris. Many heteroneras swarm actively at seashores during the full moon, perform nuptial dance and spawn. 4. Semilunar rhythms. The biological rhythms which are synchronized with the fortnightly cycle of spring tide, i.e., high tide occurring a day or two after the new or full moon, and neap tide, i.e., low tide which occurs in the middle of the second and fourth quarters of the moon, are called semilunar rhythms. For example, the gastropod mollusk periwinkle, Littorina rudis, shows a marked 14.5-day periodicity in its locomotory activity. The species lives high up on the shore and is only covered by the high water of spring tides, when it comes out of its burrow to move around and to feed. 5. Circannual rhythms. The activity of some animals and plants is influenced by the seasons occurring once in a year. They show circannual rhythms. For example, for most birds the height of the breeding season is the spring, for the deer the mating season is the fall. Likewise, brook trout spawns in the fall, basin bluegills in late spring and summer. Many animals have a part of their life in the resting stage when they exhibit reduced metabolic activity. They either hibernate, estivate or migrate from the place to avoid rigors of temperature. Migratory birds undertake long-distance migrations every year and show cyclic changes in their body weight, gonad size, plumage and coloration. The larvae of many insects, e.g., parasitic wasp, flesh fly, etc., show two phases every year: I, active, when the insect does work actively, and E, inactive or diapause, a period of arrested growth and development in insects which is under the control of endocrine system. This is an adaptation to avoid adverse conditions. Mode of function of biological clocks. Itis believe that in the course of evolution, DNA evolved the biological clock regulating growth, cell division, diurnal rhythmicity of metabolic processes, and finally the activity pattern of organisms. Biological clocks show ecophysiological integrity of the DNA cell organism. The evolutionary mechanism has brought stability to these clocks through the heredity. It is hypothesized that the intracellular equals endogenous clocks are located in the nucleus of the cell and can circadian rhythm in Arabidopsis be compared with a spring which is tightened in one phase and gradually released in another phase without ever reaching a zero level. Oscillatory motion occurs between the winding, tension, and unwinding, relaxed phases. The winding of the spring requires energy, which is received in plants from reaction initiated by light and in mammals from oxidation and reduction reactions. Many biochemical studies suggest that in the spring model, the winding phase corresponds to the synthesis of RNA and enzymes and unwinding phase to the breakdown of proteins in the cytoplasm. Such a hypothesis may work well in case of unicellular organisms, but in the case of multicellular and complex organisms various processes occur simultaneously in different tissues and organ systems. It appears that in them a central mechanism may operate through the genes, hormones, organ systems. Recent findings suggest that in invertebrates both neural and neuroendocrine products, hormones, are responsible for biological rhythms. In higher vertebrates, the central regulation of rhythms is largely performed by the hypothalamus-pituitary complex, which is genetically controlled and influenced by environmental factors such as photoperiod. For example, in birds and mammals, the pineal gland receives light stimuli and entrains to show biological rhythms. In amphibians, reptiles and birds the pineal gland is located under the skull, but in some terrestrial forms of vertebrates, it is placed over the brain in the form of the third eye. The information of photoperiod is received first by the eye and then via neural pathways reaches the pineal body, which secretes hormones such as melatonin, Reiter, 1980, which has antigonadotropic effects in various organisms such as rats, mice and many other mammals. Melatonin is believed to pass to the anterior pituitary gland and decrease secretion of gonadotropic hormones, see Guyton and Hall, 1996. Pineal body partly controls circannual rhythms of reproduction. In case of turtles, serotonin is synthesized during the day whereas melatonin during the night, but this mechanism is completely lost during hibernation period. 6. Effect of light on reproduction. In many animals, e.g., birds, light is necessary for the activation of gonads and in initiating annual breeding activities. The gonads of birds are found to become active with increased illumination during summer and to regress during shorter periods of illumination in winter. 7. Effect of light on development. Light in some cases, e.g., salmon larva, accelerates development, whereas, in other, e.g., Mytilus larva, it retards it. Further, occasionally the output of sunlight is increased by the development of sunspots. As a result of this, excess energy is radiated to space and this naturally increases the output of solar energy near the Earth. A direct consequence of this is the greater evaporation of water, which results in cloud formation to prevent more exposure to sunshine and thus to equalize temperature and modify climate. 2. Temperature. Temperature is one of the essential and changeable environmental factor. It penetrates into every region of the biosphere and profoundly influences all forms of life by exerting its action through increasing or decreasing some of the vital activities of organism, such as behavior, metabolism, reproduction, ontogenetic development, viz., embryogenesis and blastogenesis, and death. Temperature is universal influence and is frequently a limiting factor for the growth or distribution of animals and plants. Normal life activities go on smoothly at a specific temperature or at a specific range of temperatures. This is called the optimum temperature or the optimum range of temperature. Organisms react to any rise or fall of the optimum temperature range, and biotic communities more often encounter alterations only due to extremes of temperature, viz., minimum or maximum temperatures. The interaction of temperature with certain other abiotic environmental factors such as humidity, etc., cause into many other climatic changes which influence the living organisms in one way or another. Nature of temperature. Temperature is a measure of the intensity of heat in terms of a standardized unit, and is commonly expressed as degrees on either the Fahrenheit or Celsius scale. Heat is a form of energy, and is such as necessary for the very existence of life. Heat may be received or lost by animals as molecular vibrations transmitted from one part of an environment to another by radiation, convection, or conduction. It may be received as radiant energy, of course largely from the sun. Heat may be produced by mechanical work as in hawk moth. The heat is generated by vibrating the wings before takeoff, or by chemical reactions. Heat budget. The temperature at the Earth's surface